Well, hello, my students. What an exciting day. Boy, those Lions almost scored a point. It was that exciting. Now, we're going to go on. I'm going to finish up radicals next week. There's 2 more topics we need to do with it, but I'm afraid to do it now, and then you'll just forget it next week. So we're going to start imaginary numbers. In math, we don't like saying can't do it. Just don't like it. So we had this problem. We'd say, hey, excuse me, can't do it because there is no real number. So what did mathematicians do? We just came up with a new number. We decided to call I the square root of -1, whatever that is. It's a hypothetical number. So that now I can simplify this problem. I can break it up to the square root of 25 and the square root of -1. Now, this is called imaginary because you know us wacky mathematicians. If you got real numbers, you must also have to have imaginary numbers. Ha, 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 ha. So, square root of 25 is 5. Square root of -1 is I. So you should never leave square root of -1 in a problem. You always change it to I. So always remember, when you have a negative under the square root, you have to pop your eye out and see what's going on. So square root of -81. We'd say, okay, break it up, square root of 81, square root of -1. That would be 9i. Now I can even do this, square root of -18. I break it up to the square root of 9, square root of -1, and the square root of 2. So square root of 9 is 3, square root of -1 is I, 2. So do these 2 problems for me, square root of -50 and the square root of -16. Do those 2 problems. Okay. So, square root of -50, we break it up square root of 25, square root of -1, square root of 2. That would be 5i, square root of 2. And then this would be 4i. So it'd be square root of 16, square root of -1. Hoo-hoo. Now, what they did is they said, okay, we're going to take real numbers and put them with imaginary numbers. Real and imaginary, wow, that sounds tricky. So they called them complex numbers. Now, a complex number is a plus bi, where a and b are real and I is imaginary. Now, you can break up complex numbers into real numbers, and then real is broken up into rational and irrational. Now remember, a rational number is any number that could be written as a fraction. Irrational is any number that could not be a fraction. And then under rational we have integers. Then we have imaginary. Now imaginary number is just any number that has an I in it. So they put a plus bi, but b cannot be 0. So for complex, you get the real when b is 0, and you get the imaginary when b is not 0. Then under imaginary, you have pure imaginary. And a pure imaginary number is just a number times I. So example would be 7i. So anything with an I is imaginary. So pure imaginary number times I. So we can add complex numbers. Or subtract. So I could have 7 plus 2i plus 3 times or excuse me, not 3 times, 3 plus 6i. Now, how do you think you would do this? I always think of the I like an X. It's not an X. It's not an X. But you can think of it like it is. 7 plus 3 is 10. 2i plus 6i is 8i. So if I said 2 times 5 plus 4i minus 6, 2 minus 5i. Well, again, you can think of it like an X. It's not a variable. It doesn't change. It's a square root of -1, but you can think of it that way. So it'd be 10 plus 8i. Distribute the minus 6, it'd be minus 12 plus 30i. Then I can combine. 10 minus 12 is minus 2. 8i plus 30i is 38i. Now, I can take I and multiply it to I. So that would be I squared, which, since we're not in the real number system, I can do it. Square root of -1 squared is -1. So if I said what's 2i cubed, you would say 2i squared. Sorry about that. I started to do something I'm going to do in the next video. Sorry about that. Sorry. So 2 squared, I squared. 2 squared is 4. I squared is -1. So it'd be -4. So if I had 3i times 2 plus I, you'd say, well, I can do this. 3i times 2 is 6i, and 3i times I is 3i squared, but I squared is -1. So it'd be 3 times -1 is -3, and you always put the real part first and the imaginary part second. That's just how they write it. So do these two problems for me, please. 5i squared and 6i times 7 minus 2i. Do those two for me, please, and then turn me back on. Okay, so this would be 25i squared, but I squared is -1, so it's 25 times -1, which is -25. And this would be 42i. Distribute 6i, that'd be minus 12i squared. But I squared is -1, negative is positive, so that's positive 12. And you always write the real number first. I think that's enough for today. Enough for this video, not for today. You're going to have a second video in just a minute. Okay, thank you.